I'd like to welcome in founder and executive director of the National Security Institute, Jamil Jaffer. Jamil, great to see you again. So Trump has insisted that Machado does not have enough respect to run Venezuela. He has instead been working closely with Venezuela's vice president, Delcy Rodriguez. So there is certainly a lot at stake today. Do you think she'll be able to gain some favor with the president? And what vision do you think she'll be presenting to President Trump?
Well, I think, the strongest argument that Maria Corina Machado can make is I'm the elected leader, or my party are the elected leaders of Venezuela. And the reason being that she was barred from running in the 2024 elections. Her designated candidate, Edmundo Gonzalez, was properly elected. There was a dispute, right? Obviously, Maduro's hand-picked electoral board certified his election. But of course, he was not the fairly elected president of Venezuela, not that time and not the time before when Juan Guaido was elected either. And so this is part of the challenge. She has to make a claim on two fronts. One, I'm the legitimate leader of Venezuela. Two, I'm somebody you can work with more than Delcy Rodriguez, who, while she might have said the right things, is just another Maduro person, part of the Chavista movement. She's not really on Team America. I am. You want me in there. I'm the right person for this job.
All right. So Jim, I'd like to listen to some of what Machado has said in the past.
In order to have peace, you require democracy. Democracy is the system that enables peace in a society. But you cannot have democracy without freedom. And freedom is an individual decision.
All right, Jamil. So this is not her first time coming to Washington. She met with George W. Bush all the way back in 2005. Fast forward to present day 2026. She's even said she would share her Nobel Peace Prize with President Trump. It's something we know he has long wanted. So Trump hasn't ruled out a potential leadership role for her, saying she may be involved in some aspect. But put this into context for us. What's the significance of both Machado and Delcy Rodriguez having conversations with the White House? And does Rodriguez kind of have the upper hand right now? I mean, especially when it comes to offering him these business deals when it comes to oil.
Well, it is clear that Delcy Rodriguez has the upper hand because she's sitting in the chair, right? And President Trump essentially put her there by agreeing, by working to remove Maduro and having her take place. He could have easily said Machado is coming back and she's on a plane right now. We've got her on a plane. And once Maduro left, that we could have installed essentially Maria Corina Machado. The fact that we didn't do that right at the outset sends the message that there's an issue here, whatever the issue is. We don't really know the context of it. The White House has said they don't think she has enough political support to maintain control. But of course, her party, if we believe that the democratic process was working at the time, was the elected, winners of that election. And so now the question becomes, does the U.S. want to be in the position of installing our chosen person, which apparently is Delcy Rodriguez, or the person that we think the Venezuelans elected, or should we simply have a caretaker government and then let them elect the next government? And what happens if Maduro or his party wins? And I think that's the real challenge to the United States. There's no obviously right answer here, but I do think that the general thinking was amongst most Republicans and Democrats when there's conversations about going into Venezuela and taking Maduro out, that the obvious person to replace him would be Maria Corina Machado. I think everyone was sort of surprised when Delcy Rodriguez ended up being the U.S. pick, at least even as a temporary leader.
All right, so piggybacking off of that, Jamil, I mean, it has now been almost 2 weeks since Maduro was captured and brought to the U.S. From your vantage point, have you seen any real change in Venezuela, especially considering all of Maduro's government remains in power?
Well, that's the real question. I mean, obviously, the United States and the White House knows best about what they want to see out of this administration, the new administration. And it does seem like the White House thinks they're getting what they want. We have seen the U.S. taking action against Venezuelan tankers. We're now today the 7th tanker being captured. This one flying the Russian flag like a couple before it. So that's obviously going to create some tension with Russia itself. And so we'll see how this plays out. But look, at the end of the day, the U.S.'s position was Maduro's not the official leader of Venezuela. He's a fugitive from justice. We went in and got him. The next person in power is the vice president. She moves up. But if the theory is the reason Maduro wasn't the fairly elected leader of Venezuela is because he wasn't elected in that election, well, then the same sort of applies to Delcy Rodriguez. So now the question is, what do you do with that?
All right, so you mentioned that the latest seizure of a tanker. So yet another one seized, comes on the heels of the first U.S. sale of Venezuelan oil. What do you make of this?
Well, look, it's clear that the U.S. expects to control what comes in and out of Venezuela, at least during this interim period. And oil is the most important export they have. There are concerns that these oil exports have been long supporting U.S. adversaries, Iran, China, Russia. And so it's not surprising that we're seizing those oil tankers. What we'll do with them, we'll get the revenue from them. That's an open question for some amount of debate. But the real issue is that there's a lot more tankers. There's about another, according to experts, maybe 17 more tankers out there with 15 million tons of oil available. And so the question is the U.S. Coast Guard and Defense Department going to go seize all those oil tankers? And if so, what's going to happen with that oil once it's seized? President Trump has made clear it's his intent for that revenue to come to the United States. So we'll see how that plays out.
And Jamil, I have you here. I want to switch and talk really quickly about what's happening in Iran. Let's listen to some of what the president has said about executions stopping there.
Well, we're going to watch and see what the process is, but we were given a very good statement by people that are aware of what's going on. When they say no executions, everyone is talking about a lot of executions were taking place today. We were just told no executions. I hope that's true.
All right, so we don't really know who gave the president that information, but the president has promised protesters there in Iran that help is on the way. So we're learning about this apparent aborted U.S. plan to strike Iran, at least for now. What do you think happens next? Because the president has said he has not ruled out possible military action.
It's a very interesting situation because the president has been very clear publicly that he intends to support the Iranian protesters, unlike prior presidents, President Obama, President Biden, during the Green Revolution the first time, and then the Mahsa Amini protests. They didn't get a lot of support from the United States. President Trump has been very clear, help is on the way. Not clear what that means, though, right? Does that mean U.S. airstrikes? Does that mean supplies, weapons, perhaps, to the protesters? How do we get those in? Is that covert action? Are we using are the Israelis helping us? What's going on that front? And then if there is regime change, is that U.S. fomented regime change, or is that really the protesters? Those are all the open questions. But what is clear is the president has been very public about his intent to support the protesters. And what's surprising, actually, is the internal dissension within the administration that's been reported. Apparently, Vice President J.D. Vance advocating to do a nuclear deal with Iran, which is surprising, and to not go after the Iranian regime, which is, again, a very odd place for the vice president to be, particularly when the president himself appears to be more forward-leaning. So we'll see how this plays out, at least temporarily. The president decided not to take military action, but hopefully he's providing support, economic, financial, and ideally, the kind of support the protesters need, weapons indeed, if necessary, to help them get the upper hand and take their country back from the regime that's oppressed them for so many years.
Jamil Jaffer, thank you, as always.